If you feel that life is stuck, that your self-esteem is fragile and your achievements fall short of what you deserve, this video is for you. Enough of living on autopilot, hostage to mental patterns that sabotage your inner power and feed cycles of emotional pain and suffering. The truth is liberating until you decipher the messages of the unconscious and transform your internal state. Nothing around you will change. Here I'll show you how to use Carl Jung's teachings and deep mind reprogramming to exchange self-sabotage for self-mastery and insecurity for magnetic presence. Hit like and subscribe to the channel. Many watch the videos, learn, but don't subscribe, and end up missing content that could revolutionize their lives. Stay with me until the end and discover how to break free from stagnation, activate your transformative energy, and attract only what you deserve. The next step is yours, and it starts now. Within each person exists a silent force capable of radically transforming their story, but almost never recognized by the hurried gaze of ordinary minds. The unconscious, that vast internal territory, hides resources of self-mastery, resilience, and inner power far beyond what the ego usually imagines. Carl Jung taught us that as long as we insist on seeking the answer to suffering outside, we ignore the true fuel of transformation, the ability to look within and face what is yet to be integrated. After all, human suffering arises far more from conflict with our own mental patterns than from external events themselves. You may think your limitations come from circumstances, criticism, or failures, but the truth is that the stories hidden in the unconscious dictate your psychological growth, or your stagnation. Self-mastery only becomes possible when you're willing to explore your shadows and practice radical emotional detachment from old wounds. Silence and magnetic presence are the attitudes of one who has understood that emotional control begins with the attentive observation of one's own reactions, not with attempts to control the world around us. True emotional alchemy does not exist without the willingness to immerse oneself in the pain and accept, without resistance, that every suffering is an invitation to transcendence. Radical acceptance of this inner power does not mean passivity toward life, but absolute responsibility for what one thinks, feels, and does. When you recognize that everything you need is already in your own unconscious, the frantic search for external validation ceases, and in fact, deep personal development begins. It is not about denying reality, but about recognizing that our body language, recurrent thoughts, and mental patterns create, or destroy, our self-esteem and our destiny. Here is where true psychological growth begins. When you accept that inner power depends on no one but yourself. And if all this still seems abstract, try this now. Close your eyes, observe 1 minute of silence, and notice what lies behind your automatic thoughts. Allow yourself to feel the magnetic presence of your own being, that silent space where there is no judgment, only awareness. Feel how the unconscious reveals its layers, showing that self-mastery is not a mystical gift, but an ability available to anyone who allows access to their own center. When you position yourself as the observer of your mind, you inaugurate a new stage of inner transformation, opening the door to a life in which suffering is raw material for transcendence, not a perpetual sentence. Almost everyone grew up believing that uncomfortable feelings and strange intuitions are signals of something to avoid, as if the unconscious were an enemy, a black hole inside the mind. In reality, that hidden side carries the most valuable messages for your personal development. Carl Jung, with unwavering wisdom, stated that what we deny in the unconscious does not disappear. Instead, it dominates our life, and we still call it destiny. True self-mastery begins there, when you stop fighting yourself and learn to listen to what your soul tries to communicate, even if it comes disguised as emotional pain or repetitive mental patterns. Every intense emotion, every misplaced intuition, every thought that insists on returning, is a small clue left by your unconscious to guide you toward inner transformation. Instead of repressing or ignoring these signals, experience accepting them as part of the process of psychological growth. It is not about feeding suffering, but recognizing in it an attempt by the unconscious to lead you toward a more authentic path, where emotional control is born from radical acceptance of our own humanity, with its flaws, impulses, and contradictions. In this way, true inner power begins to emerge, one that depends neither on the ego nor on external validation, but on attentive silence before oneself. Become an investigator of your own inner world. Observe how the unconscious acts subtly in your body language, in your impulses, Even in your deepest silences, what seems merely anxiety or anger is often an invitation to rescue parts of yourself abandoned over the course of life. Practice the exercise of noting your emotions and intuitions throughout the day without judging them. Over time, you will discover that those records reveal clear patterns. They are maps of your psychological growth, paths to self-knowledge, and to overcoming old sufferings. Remember, the difference between one who lives on autopilot, hostage to their unconscious, and one who experiences true emotional alchemy, lies in the willingness to see the unconscious as an ally. Try this in the coming days. Each time you feel a strong emotion, stop, breathe, and ask yourself, what does my unconscious want to show me now? Little by little, magnetic presence will replace the sensation of being out of control, and your natural resilience will flourish. And believe me, by turning the unconscious into a guide, you discover true self-mastery's power and a solid foundation for any transcendence. In the silent theater of the unconscious, there exists a character almost no one wants to face: the shadow. That dark side, so denied, so avoided, is the vault where we store everything we once considered unacceptable in ourselves. But here lies the secret Jung revealed. The shadow is not an enemy, but a powerful ally of self-knowledge and true personal development. Ignoring it only increases suffering and the ego's weight. Integrating it, on the other hand, is the first step to conquering real and lasting self-mastery. Each time you catch yourself reacting with excessive anger, envy, or even with a silence loaded with resentment, the shadow is manifesting, asking to be observed without judgment. Emotional pain, which sometimes seems inexplicable, is often the reflection of that repressed content, those parts we insist on hiding, yet continue to influence our behavior, our body language, and even our most intimate relationships. True psychological growth happens when you accept, radically, the existence of those contradictions, without trying to sweep under the rug what makes you uncomfortable. Want a practical exercise? The next time you feel discomfort with someone or a situation, make a strategic pause. Instead of reacting or justifying yourself, ask, what in me is being exposed right now? Monitor your breathing. Notice how your body reacts, and let memories, beliefs, and hidden feelings surface. This is the beginning of emotional alchemy, transforming the shadow into inner power, using self-mastery not to repress, but to integrate and mature. Thus, each suffering ceases to be merely pain and becomes raw material for deep inner transformation. Don't fall into the trap of expecting perfection or seeking external validation to feel complete. Radical acceptance is accepting even what seems unforgivable in yourself, knowing that it is in the shadow where the seed of your resilience lies. Only by looking your own unconscious squarely in the eye, acknowledging the zones of emotional pain and suffering, do you build a genuine magnetic presence that attracts relationships and experiences aligned with your new awareness. The path of self-knowledge has no shortcuts, but each step toward the shadow is also a step toward the light. Most people spend their lives seeking approval, waiting for recognition, praise, a sign of acceptance from others. The ego, naturally lacking, creates a subtle trap. It makes personal worth depend on external validation, imprisoning self-esteem in the opinions of others. Jung noted that this incessant quest not only feeds suffering, but perpetuates mental patterns of insecurity, distancing the self from true personal development. As long as inner power remains outsourced, there is no self-mastery, only emotional dependence. Authentic self-esteem is born from the courageous encounter with one's unconscious. It strengthens when you recognize your talents, limitations, pains, and achievements without needing the public's applause. Then silence becomes an ally. In inner stillness, you perceive the difference between essence and social mask. When you achieve emotional control, you learn to observe criticism without identifying with it, and praise without losing yourself in it. This is radical acceptance, understanding that your existence has value in itself, and that no approval can replace the sense of fullness born within. In practice, emotional detachment means questioning, whose expectation is this? Or, why does my peace depend so much on others' opinions? Exercise small daily actions of autonomy, such as making simple decisions without seeking immediate advice, or validating your feelings before expressing them. Over time, psychological growth stops conditioning on external circumstances and becomes the fruit of your own inner transformation. Thus, your magnetic presence increases and you begin to attract healthier relationships based on mutual respect, not lack. Don't wait for the perfect moment to feel enough. Self-mastery is built in the daily action of reaffirming your dignity front of the mirror, even when doubt, fear, or emotional pain attempt to convince you otherwise. Allow yourself to break free from the cycle of suffering fed by the ego and take responsibility for cultivating unbreakable self-esteem based on self-knowledge and acceptance of who you really are. True freedom arrives when the need for external approval loses strength, and you discover that you already carry within you everything you deserve. Have you noticed how certain situations seem to repeat in your life? Almost like a movie with a pre-written script? Toxic relationships, similar failures, or the sense of always hitting the same limits are not by chance. They are living expressions of the mental and emotional patterns residing in your unconscious. Jung revealed that we project onto others what we don't want to acknowledge in ourselves. This common, silent dynamic perpetuates suffering and prevents true psychological growth. Projections are ego shortcuts to avoid facing our shadow. When you accuse another of coldness, you may be ignoring your own difficulty in expressing feelings. By judging someone for lack of self-mastery, perhaps you unconsciously fight your own impulsivity. Inner power reveals itself when you invert the gaze. Every irritation, envy, or resentment you feel toward another is, in reality, an invitation from the unconscious to examine what needs transformation inside you. Identifying repetitive patterns requires courage and magnetic presence. Instead of playing the victim or settling for superficial explanations, practice radical self-observation. Ask, what is this situation trying to show me about myself? Or, which part of my shadow am I projecting here? By recognizing and embracing these contents, you interrupt cycles of suffering and activate true emotional alchemy, transmuting pain into learning and limitation into transcendence. No inner transformation exists without confronting your projections. If you wish to break toxic patterns and finally attract what you truly deserve, start by accepting that every encounter, every conflict, and every relationship is a mirror of your own unconscious path. By transforming emotional pain into a starting point for self-knowledge, you free yourself from automatic repetition and take emotional control of your life. And remember, all change begins the moment you allow yourself to look beyond appearances, welcoming the hidden messages of your unconscious. Imagine carrying an invisible backpack on your shoulders, filled with old guilt, unresolved fears, accumulated disappointments, and grudges gathered through life. This emotional load, though hidden, shapes your choices, affects your body language, and limits your personal development. Jung masterfully described how these often unconscious burdens keep suffering alive, feeding mental patterns that sabotage your freedom. Self-mastery begins precisely with the courage to open that backpack, examine each stored object, and consciously decide what remains worth carrying. Inner power blossoms when you practice emotional detachment, learning to let go of what no longer serves your evolution. This requires radical acceptance, admitting that certain pains and losses are part of psychological growth, and that insisting on reliving resentments only intensifies your own suffering. Pain does not reside in the facts themselves, but in the resistance to release them. Letting go is not forgetting, but giving the past a new meaning, freeing yourself from the ego's control and making room for true inner transformation. A simple yet powerful practice. Write in silence everything you feel you carry: guilt, fear, insecurity, anger. Observe these emotions. Breathe deeply and say mentally, I accept. I'm grateful for the lesson, but I choose to let it go. Repeat whenever the weight increases. This way, magnetic presence strengthens and emotional control becomes possible, as less energy is trapped in the past. Little by little, resilience becomes natural, and suffering loses power before your new perspective. Letting go of the emotional backpack is an act of courage and self-compassion. Whoever assumes this responsibility opens to psychological growth, new experiences, and lighter relationships capable of reflecting renewed consciousness. By practicing detachment, you understand that true transcendence does not depend on others, but on your internal decision not to identify with pain any longer. And thus, emotional alchemy happens. You transform suffering into freedom, making space for the new. Have you noticed how when you truly change inside, suitable situations and people seem to arise out of nowhere? This is not coincidence, but synchronicity, a fundamental Jungian concept showing how the unconscious, aligned with your true self, operates in harmony with the universe. Synchronicity is that instant when a word, an encounter, a book, or an opportunity arrives just when you need it most. It's not magic, but a reflection of your personal development and deep integration between inner and outer worlds. When you begin to practice self-mastery, accept your shadow, let go of the emotional backpack, and seek genuine magnetic presence, your energy field changes. Suffering and scarcity patterns give way to openness, in which the universe's responses become perceptible. The ego loses strength, and radical acceptance of life's flow allows opportunities and relationships compatible with your new consciousness level to appear. Emotional control here means not forcing outcomes, but trusting in the timing of answers. Try this practical exercise. Each time something seemingly by chance occurs, ask, "What is this experience showing me about my path?" Observe coincidences, patterns, positive repetitions, and note how they connect to your inner state. The unconscious reveals signals constantly. It's up to you to develop the sensitivity to perceive and act on them. This is true emotional alchemy, where suffering becomes learning and magnetic presence becomes natural attraction. When you live according to your true self, life ceases to be a battlefield and becomes a stage of possibilities. Answers that once seemed distant emerge almost inevitably. That is synchronicity, the dance between your personal development and the universe's movement. Each response is also an invitation to deepen inner transformation and the continuous process of transcendence. Few have the courage to walk the path of individuation, that profound process of becoming who we truly are, described by Jung as the greatest act of personal development. Most settle for living by inherited mental patterns, social expectations, and ego impositions, even at the cost of emotional pain, suffering, and chronic emptiness. But true inner transformation only happens when you dare to immerse yourself in the unconscious, face your shadows, and assume radical responsibility for your own story. To individuate is to break free from external approval and escape emotional autopilot. This path is not made of prefab formulas, but of conscious choices, small daily transcendences, and a constant stance of radical acceptance toward your own imperfections. Self-mastery here is born from confronting ego's illusions, emotionally detaching from old beliefs, and cultivating the inner silence that allows listening to your essence. Each step on this journey is also an act of courage. It demands resilience, detachment, and magnetic presence capable of sustaining creative solitude of self-knowledge. In this process, suffering ceases to be the villain and becomes the teacher. Every emotional pain signals resistance, an opportunity for transformation. It's not about eliminating suffering, but transmuting it into fuel for psychological growth. Emotional control here is the recognition that there is no evolution without conflict, and that alchemy occurs when you integrate fragmented parts of your being. Freedom arises precisely from that confrontation. Only whoever accepts their own shadow can truly access inner power. The path of individuation is neither linear nor quick, but it's inevitable for those seeking meaning, fulfillment, and true transcendence. At each stage, you become less dependent on external validation and more committed to your deepest truth. The universe responds to this movement with synchronicities and new scenarios, inviting you to review patterns, dissolve old sufferings, and celebrate the conquest of a new self. How about starting today with a simple act of inner courage? No matter how hard you try to deny it, every relationship works as a mirror of your own unconscious. People who enter and stay in your life reflect parts of your emotional state, your mental patterns, and even those shadows you'd rather hide. Jung taught us, what most bothers you in another actually points to unresolved aspects within you. Suffering that arises in relationships is almost always an invitation to radical acceptance and inner transformation, not a punishment or sign of failure. If you perceive a pattern of recurring emotional pain in your relationships, lack, jealousy, dependency, constant need for validation, stop and observe. What do these experiences reveal about your own inner power? Personal development involves recognizing that external dynamics feed on the unconscious. They are projections of what has yet to be integrated. Only he who assumes responsibility for what he feels and stops expecting someone else to fill old voids conquers self-mastery. In the coming days, practice self-observation during everyday interactions. Notice your body language, automatic reactions, impulses for emotional control, or tendencies to defensive silence. Every intense emotion that arises in contact with others is an opportunity for psychological growth and to overcome mental patterns that keep suffering alive. Emotional alchemy occurs precisely in that mirror clash. By recognizing yourself in another, you gain the chance to transform relationships and, above all, yourself. Remember, no one is responsible for your happiness or your pain. Relationships are the stage where the ego reveals itself, where wounds emerge, but also where resilience, emotional detachment, and genuine magnetic presence can flourish. By using relationships as instruments of self-knowledge, you dissolve old bonds, access deeper levels of acceptance, and open the way to a more mature love toward yourself and others. Are you willing to courageously face the mirrors of your life? True transformation begins when you stop running from yourself and face head-on what you've avoided. Intellectual understanding of mental patterns, suffering, and the power of the unconscious is not enough. It is necessary to act, make brave decisions, break the automatic cycle, and abandon comfort. Jung claimed that personal development demands not only deep reflection, but also conscious action, that daily choice to bring light to the unconscious, breaking old habits and cultivating new attitudes. Magnetic presence doesn't appear by chance, but from the constant decision to observe yourself, embrace your shadows, and practice self-mastery even in the face of emotional pain. Don't wait for motivation to come from outside. Build the habit of pausing, breathing, questioning your reactions, and assuming responsibility for your own psychological growth. Exercise emotional detachment by freeing yourself from the need to control the uncontrollable and experience radical acceptance of life's flow, trusting your resilience to overcome each challenge. How about a practical exercise now? Throughout the day, choose a difficult situation and, instead of reacting automatically, make an intentional pause. Observe your body language, feel what arises from the unconscious, and ask yourself, how can I respond differently, aligned with who I really want to be? Small conscious choices, repeated consistently, are true emotional alchemy. They transform suffering into self-knowledge and create a virtuous cycle of transcendence and inner growth. Remember, life doesn't change because you think differently, but because you act differently. Don't let ego, fear, or resistance postpone your evolution any longer. With every act of courage, every choice of radical acceptance, you draw closer to your inner power and experience in practice what freedom is to be yourself. The path is open. Are you willing to take the next step toward your transformation? Now it depends on you. Which unconscious pattern is impeding your growth today? Share your experience or opinion in the comments. Your journey may inspire others to take their next step. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because that's the only way you'll ensure access to content that can truly transform your life from the inside out. Also, check out the next recommended video on screen. It's the perfect complement to deepen your transformation and accelerate your personal development. See you later, and master your unconscious.